Chapter 6 A People in Revolution. In 1775, the colonial economy was taking a major blow from British taxation, especially from the most recent Intolerable Acts. The colonists had taken down organized government, and the colonies were governed by committees and groups made exclusively by the people. Though the colonists resisted passionately against the British, they had not reached a consensus on whether or not to remain loyal to Great Britain. This adolescent-type behavior characterized the Revolutionary and founding generations. It is an integral part of the American identity because despite its irrationality, it fueled the American cause. In April of 1775, Parliament ordered British troops to seize colonial arms. Colonial Minutemen attacked back immediately. The British then moved to Concord, but even there they were forced to withdraw. This was the first direct confrontation between the British and the Americans. The attack caused the Second Continental Congress to convene, and after a heated debate, the delegates decided to call upon colonial troops for war. Once again, the purpose for the war became a daunting question that Congress realized it would have to address. Making a final attempt at reconciliation, Congress wrote a declaration of why they decided to take up arms, and even sent the olive branch petition asking the king to protect their rights. This signified that Congress believed that the colonies needed Great Britain to survive. However, Great Britain responded by dismissing Congress's plea and embargoing all trade to the colonists. By the time Common Sense was published, Congress began to seriously consider independence. On January 9, 1776, Thomas Paine published the pamphlet titled Common Sense. Using clear ideas, Common Sense stated that America should gain its independence from England. The pamphlet, although stating ideas that were not relatively new, made a huge impact on the colonists because of its use of simple language and biblical imagery that were easily communicated to the people. Common Sense made the colonists believe that it was possible to create new political order, and it helped make the idea of independence seem realistic. He put forward that a strong government will not represent the ideas of the people, but will rather exploit its power. Paine had supported this fear of a strong government that managed to continue even after the Revolution and affected the shaping of our government. On June 7th, Richard Henry Lee introduced a resolution for independence that was debated for 2 days. Concluded as a unanimous decision, a committee to write the Declaration of Independence was established. The committee drew ideals from philosophers such as John Locke and included in the document that all men had the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The values stated in the Declaration of Independence served as a basis in writing documents such as the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. This document represented the birth of America as an independent nation. The American Revolution was fought in 2 key theaters, the North and the South. Washington's attempt to capture New York failed. However, he learned the important lesson that he could not win large battles against the British Army. Employing new guerrilla tactics, Washington's victory at Trenton proved a huge morale boost to the Continental Army, and without that victory, the army could have dissolved that winter. The most important battle took place at the Battle of Saratoga, in which the Americans were victorious and secured the French as an ally, an element that promised an American victory to the war. Britain had some setbacks fighting in the north. They then decided to attack the south, knowing it was an easier target. At first this worked, as Britain destroyed Georgia and both Carolinas with little to no resistance. The devastating defeat at Charleston nearly ended the American Revolution in the South. However, when Nathanael Greene was sent to take charge of the Southern Army, he learned from Washington and used tactics that proved to be successful. The Battle of Yorktown was the most important for the South. Washington cornered Cornwallis, while the French blocked British access to the sea. Cornwallis was forced to surrender. The British troops soon withdrew, and the war ended with the signing of a peace treaty in November of 1782. After the Battle of Yorktown, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, and John Jay were sent to Paris to negotiate the terms of a peace treaty with the British diplomat Richard Oswald. The treaty that they had created encountered no great resistance from Great Britain. The treaty agreed that America would become an independent country with a western boundary set at the Mississippi River. In turn, America also agreed to restore property to Loyalists. The Treaty of Paris marked the official split of the United States from Great Britain. However, the treaty was not clear in some areas, leaving British forces in American territory for much too long, and causing other problems for both parties in the future. The Revolutionary War was above else a people's war. The Americans mainly won because the people's passion and support. Colonial participation came in all forms, like participating in state militias. Also, as a people's war, the Revolutionary War eventually turned into a poor man's fight, in which mainly poor people fought and participated. Many of the wealthy colonists could hire replacements or contribute through other means. Overall, though, people's passion and belief that the future of human liberties depended on their success allowed for the colonists to succeed. Some colonists even believed that God sanctioned the Revolutionary War. However, this soon became a dangerous theme that would show itself multiple times throughout American history. Not all colonists supported the revolutionaries, and the ones who didn't were called Loyalists. The fact that colonists were divided made the American Revolution not only a revolutionary war but also a civil war. This made the war extremely personal to all those who were fighting in the war, since it was not uncommon to be fighting face to face with a neighbor or even a friend. Tensions ran high, and the colonists found themselves united but disunited at the same time. The Revolutionary War had a profound impact on the life of virtually every colonist living in the Americas at the time. The war produced thousands of refugees, since destruction almost always followed wherever the armies went. Due to a lack of resources, both armies had to live off of the land, thereby disturbing the lives of the civilians. Perhaps the worst impact of the war was the fact that disease killed an estimated 130,000 people. This forced the colonists to rebuild their nation almost entirely from scratch after the war had ended. Out of all of the groups affected by the American Revolution, the Native Americans were the most negatively affected. Both the Americans and the British wanted them to stay neutral, but the Indians were forced to take sides, since they had an intricate relationship with both opposing groups. Most Native Americans sided with the British, including the Iroquois Six Nations, since the British had protected their land and promised to continue to. A few Native American tribes sided with the Patriots. However, no matter what side the Native Americans took, the opposing group would exact revenge. For example, after the war, the colonists completely decimated the Iroquois Six Nations, destroying entire villages and taking their land. Even the Native Americans who sided with the colonists eventually got their land taken away or were destroyed by the British during the war. In terms of the effect on African Americans, all the talk about liberty instigated slave rebellions throughout the colonies. It was ironic that the colonists could demand that they be treated equal while ignoring the treatment of African Americans. This contradictory way of thinking would remain a fundamental problem in America until the Civil War. Furthermore, taking advantage of the slaves' thirst for freedom, Britain convinced many African Americans to fight for their side, promising freedom. For example, Lord Dunmore's proclamation convinced hundreds of slaves to defect to the British side. In the end, most slaves did not receive the freedom they dreamed of. The Articles of Confederation were created in response to the growing need for a national government. The delegates were extremely cautious in creating a central government too strong that would trample upon individual rights. As a result, the Articles were a form of compromise between state and national power and were ratified by all 13 states in 1781. The Articles outlined a few powers solely given to Congress, none of which were substantial enough for it to unite the colonies and run efficiently. The Articles also limited the powers of Congress, since any power which was not stated explicitly as Congress's power remained in state legislatures' hands. Also, the Articles could only be modified with the approval of all 13 states. This left Congress only able to plead with states for favors or contributions, which were often ignored or rejected. The Articles of Confederation failed as an article intended to govern the citizens of the 13 states through one centralized government. Congress was essentially just a name with no real ability to accomplish their goals. The people's cautiousness were excessive and served as an impasse to a strong form of Republican government. However, they succeeded in gaining individual states' lands west of their borders, allowing for the creation of new states and the expansion of the nation in later years. The Articles were the first official document to unify the 13 states, allowing the United States to truly come together and support each other. The Articles also acted as an important trial stage for which the Constitution could be made to have it improved. While the Articles of Confederation outlined the powers of the central government, the American people still had to iron out how they wanted to govern their states in accordance with Republican ideology. These three questions were the most troubling to Americans because they did not want to tip the balance towards either anarchy or monarchy. However, the experience of British tyranny and the Revolution provided Americans with values they were certain they wanted to integrate into state governments. At the heart of these elements of public virtue, equality, and public authority was the notion that power can only reside within the people. Everything related to the government is just the direct expression of the people's will, and the people must be responsible for the welfare of the nation. Keeping these values in mind, state representatives got to work. However, Massachusetts delegates were the first to realize that the system of government must be as specific as possible in order to protect the rights of the people. They formed the first constitutional convention, where delegates debated and contested ideas, and established a system in which the government could only operate within constitutional bounds. During the process of constitution writing, the states experienced many splits in Republican ideology. For example, the Pennsylvania and Massachusetts constitutions sharply contrasted one another, as one was radically democratic, while the latter tried to preserve a moderate view of democracy. The distinction between the two highlights the struggle to maintain a balance between private interests and common good. It also connects specific democratic views to each social class and provides insight to how their viewpoints evolve depending on social and economic circumstances. In order to promote virtue, a new female role emerged. The idea of Republican motherhood gave a new responsibility to females of the new generation that ensured that democratic ideals would be ingrained into successful generations of Americans. The term Republican motherhood brought forth more respect for women. Even though they had set up a new government and helped to free their nation, the new revolutionary generation was far from perfect. Laced within all their core values were fundamental paradoxes, and some of their policies prevented change from ever happening. Politics were only for the male gender, and females would never be able to be a part of it because social tradition left them without any substantial property rights. In addition, African Americans were counted only as property and not as human beings. Even though some political leaders agreed that this was inconsistent with American values, they would not touch upon the subject for centuries if it meant sacrificing the nation. However, the Revolutionary War gave birth to a new independent nation. The American people were left united and stronger than before. The Revolution sparked the development of equality and freedom that would influence the formation of new political order. The Revolution created a sense of pride and nationality in America. The American ideals formed during the Revolution would prove to impact the nation and the world in later years.